this guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
I won't repeat the very long list of caveats applicable to these summaries, but I will repeat that they must be read in light of those limitations. So a few of them have already been entered into evidence. The rest are coming now. We'll start from the beginning. Can Sum 1, Don Valley North Liberal Party nomination race in 2019. There we go. That one's already in evidence. Thank you. Can Sum 2, intelligence relating to Handong and communication with PRC officials regarding the two Michaels. Can Sum 3, PRC officials' foreign interference activities in Greater Vancouver in the 2019 general election. Can Sum 4, possible PRC foreign interference related mis or disinformation. And Mr. Clerk, if you can just scroll through the document briefly as I do this, that would be helpful. Thank you. Can Sum 5, country summary, People's Republic of China. Can Sum 6, country summary, Russia. Can Sum 7, country summary, India. Can Sum 8, country summary, Pakistan. Can Sum 9, country summary, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Can Sum 10, PRC threat actors, contact with candidates and staff, and funding of threat actors. Can Sum 11, TRM threat reduction measure conducted in 2019. Can Sum 12, Government of India foreign interference activities in the 2021 general election. Can Sum 13, we're almost done, I promise. Comments by individual PRC officials on expressed partisan preferences in the 2019 and 2021 general elections. Finally, can Sum 14, country summary, Iran. And as I said, these can now be referenced in upcoming examinations.
Good afternoon, Madam Commissioner. Gordon Cameron, Commission Counsel. I will be conducting the examination of this panel this afternoon with Maître Mackay. We will divide it up between us, but I will begin by introducing the panel and having them sworn. Could you ask, sir, to...
Ms. Tessie, would you like to be sworn or affirmed?
Affirmed, please.
Okay. May I please have your name and spell your last name for the record?
Certainly, c'est Michel Tessier, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, T-E-S-S-I-E-R.
Merci. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vigneault, will you please have your first name and spell your last name again for the record?
David Vigneault, V-I-G-N-E-A-U-L-T.
V-I-G-N-E-A-U-L-T.
Okay. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And now your turn, Ms. Henderson. Would you like to be sworn or affirmed?
Affirmed.
Affirmed, okay. May I please have your full name and your last name spelled out for the record, please?
Cherie Henderson, Henderson.
Thank you. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. Panel, I'll begin with some housekeeping, and then I'll let Maître Mackay take over for some of the questions. But if I could ask you first to just answer a few questions for me about the institutional report that the service filed with the Commission. For the record and for the assistance of counsel and parties, the document has the number CanDoc many zeros 17 in English and CanDoc many zeros 18 for the French version. And then there are 3 appendices that go along with that. Again, 1701, 02, 03, and 1801, 02, 03. And Mr. Vigneault, I'll ask you if you can confirm that institutional report was prepared for the Commission and represents part of the service's evidence before the Commission.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. I'll just mention for the benefit of parties that the appendices that I just mentioned are specifically drafted for disclosure to the public, and that the body of the institutional report refers to other appendices that have not been filed because there's no public version of them, just to avoid confusion on that. Now, panel, we have 2 sets of documents that I'm going to try to do at the same time with you. So I'll just describe them globally and then ask you a few questions about them. One is, you three, the same 3 of you, were interviewed by Commission Counsel on February 13th, 2024. And you were also examined in camera by the Commission at a hearing shortly after that. And public summaries have been prepared in respect of both that interview and your in-camera evidence. Have you reviewed these documents for the purposes of accuracy?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did.
Yes.
Thank you. And do you have any corrections that you would like to make to these documents?
Not for me.
No.
No.
I'm just going to pause a second and see if I can get counsel for the Attorney General's attention. Because we had wondered if there might be a correction to one of the statements in the in-camera examination summary.
I believe there was, Mr. Cameron. We discussed that before we resumed here. I'm not sure which the paragraph is.
If you look at paragraph 18, it might remind the witnesses of the point.
That's correct.
Mr. Vigneault, maybe if you could look at paragraph 18 and tell us if you have a correction to make to the summary of your in-camera evidence.
Yep.
And perhaps the court officer could pull up, it is WHIT 48.
Yes. I believe it concerns the timing of a TRM.
And if the court officer could scroll to paragraph 18 of that document.
Cool.
I think there's no paragraph number.
There we go.
There's-
On this document, there are some. And Mr. Vigneault, looking at that paragraph, are you reminded as to whether or not you want to make a correction to the information there?
Yes, Madam Commissioner, Paragraph 18 reads, Mr. Vigneault explained that the TRM was conducted during the 2019 election. And in discussion with council earlier, to be more precise, the TRM was conducted prior to 2019. And some of the intelligence and some of the outcome of this, of course, took place during the election. But to be more precise, the TRM was conducted prior to the election.
Thank you for that correction. And with that correction made, panelists, and with respect to both the summary of your interview and the summary of your in-camera evidence, do you adopt those documents as part of your evidence before the Commission today?
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
Thank you. And just an explanatory note before I hand over the microphone to Maître Mackay. There are two other documents, Madam Commissioner, that got filed representing the information of CSIS representatives who will not be appearing as witnesses, but I'll just mention them for the record. WIT 35 is an interview summary of the CSIS ADR Directorate, and WIT 43 is a summary of the in-camera evidence in that regard. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm Jean-Philippe Macan for the Commission. I will be asking my questions in French to our witnesses this afternoon. Of course, they are free to answer in the language of their choice. So we will start with general presentations. I will invite the panelists to introduce themselves and explain the role that they play and that they have played within CSIS before their departure. So, Mr. Vigneault, you may start. David Vigneault, I am head of the Center since 2017 of CSIS. So my position as head comprised general administration of the service, responsibility for the service's activities, as well as the main spokesperson for external relations with Canadians and abroad. Question? Madame Tessier? Answer, yes, hello. I retired from CSIS in March last year, but I worked for CSIS for 35 years as an intelligence officer, and I ended up in the role of Deputy Head of Operations, in charge essentially of management and governance of the services operations. So central administration, regional offices, security screening, etc. And I replaced the head when he was absent. Madame Anderson.
I joined
Hello.
the service in 1992 as an intelligence officer, and I have been responsible for various investigations within the organization in management and leadership roles. I was the Director General of the Intelligence Assessment Branch, and my final position was the Assistant Director of Requirements. I recently retired from the service.
So you know that we have an institutional report from CSIS that details the mandate and the powers of CSIS. I would ask you the first question for Mr. Vigneault to present summarily what CSIS is about. Answer. Well, CSIS is the Human Intelligence Service of Canada. We have as a mandate to collect information, to produce intelligence, and to inform the government as regards any national security threats that are described in the CSIS Act. We also have the mandate to take measures to reduce threats when it is possible to do so. The way we work is obviously we use Our mandate is to acquire secrets and to be able to share these secrets with the government. So we use different means of obtaining information. We work with technical source information, we recruit human sources, and we work with partners in Canada and abroad. We have over 300 relations with intelligence agencies abroad so that we can acquire as much information as possible, so as to have the best point of view as possible. And all that work is done by CSIS professionals, and that means that Canadians are safer every day for it in Canada and abroad. I should maybe mention that we have a hybrid mandate in the sense that many countries have two intelligence agencies to do that work. Canada has one agency, CSIS, that operates here in Canada, as well as throughout the world. We have agents deployed in a permanent manner or temporary manner so that we can ensure we get the right intelligence and take the right actions to protect Canadians in Canada or abroad. Question. And of course, I should have mentioned the departure, but if one or the other of the witnesses wants to add to an answer, please don't hesitate. I should have mentioned that from the start. So, Mr. Vigneault, I will ask our clerk to pull up document CanDoc 18, please. This is the institutional report in the French version. And I would ask you to scroll down.
Thank you. Scroll down a little bit more. Thank you.
Question still. This morning we heard two representatives of Global Affairs Canada who discussed the definition of foreign interference as regards foreign influence. And we know that in Article 2 of the CSIS Act, the threats to Canada's security are defined. So I would like you to explain what this notion of threat towards Canada is compared to the influence, the activities of influence from abroad. Answer. If you allow me, I will answer. It is indicated here under the activities influenced by foreign actors. That's the word that was used in the definition. I will underline it dates from 1984, so it is not recent that the service has the mandate of investigating on this type of threat. I would like to underline also that we have to meet certain criteria, so it has to be clandestine. We're trying to hide the involvement of a foreign state actor. It has to involve a foreign power, and it has to be against Canada's interests. It can also include threats to its communities. So it's important to identify these criteria properly so that this service can identify the activity as being, we call it foreign interference now, even if the Act talks of influence. But on layman's terms, we talk of foreign interference. And Mrs. Tessier, you say it includes threats? Answer, such as coercion to people who are on the Canadian territory. Should I understand that at that moment, automatically, it meets that criteria of being against Canada's interests? Answer. Yes, the aim is to protect Canadian citizens, Canadian residents, and Canada's interests. Question, and simply on this notion of Canadian interest, can you explain more how this idea of interest is understood by CSIS? Answer, well, obviously the Act defines the threats, but if I take, for example, the pandemic, or if, for example, I look at the Freedom Convoy and everything that happened around the impact on the Canadian economy, of course, it concerns Canada's interests, but it isn't strictly defined in this CSIS Act. So the service evolves in its activities. We could say it's espionage, it's maybe foreign interference, and it's the way we manage it. But I would say that it's often broader than what we find strictly defined in the Act. But for sure, CSIS has to link it to a threat, of course. But that's why when I talk of Canada's interests, it might be a bit broader than the words we find in the Act. Mrs. Commissioner, if you allow me to add to what Mrs. Tessier mentioned, it's important to understand CSIS activities, including in the notion of Canada's interests, in the context of intelligence priorities for Canada. The Canadian government, the cabinet decides of intelligence priorities, and those priorities are given to us through a department directive, through public safety. And as Mrs. Tessier mentioned, even if national interests are not defined in the Act, with the interpretation of the Act and the interpretation of these departmental directives, when it comes to intelligence priorities, it gives us a context, a very clear context, so that we can then implement operationally the work and the ways we can manage the threat. So it's important to understand this with the full context to be able to understand how the Act operates. Question, and we understand that foreign interference includes democratic processes and institutions, but can you explain in general how CSIS works to protect democratic institutions and processes in Canada? Answer. Absolutely. When we look at foreign interference, the way we see it is that we look at what the interests are of a foreign power interfering here in Canada. So once we understand the interest, the intention, and the capacity of the foreign state trying to interfere in Canada, it gives us an idea of what will be the vectors of interference. The summaries that were produced earlier demonstrate that some countries commit interference for different reasons, and other countries, such as, for example, the PRC, commit interference in every way. So the democratic institutions that are broader than simply elections at the federal level. It includes democratic institutions at every level of governance, so federal, provincial, territorial, but also all the governance of Indigenous affairs in Canada. Those are vectors of foreign interference or ways for foreign powers to interfere in our democratic system. There's another important aspect of foreign interference that wasn't discussed as much publicly over the last few months, but is foreign interference towards individuals. It's often what we talk of transnational repression. So by meeting the criteria of the CSIS Act, they are committing activities towards these individuals to favor the interests of that foreign power. So we can come back to those later during your questions, but I think there is a lot of context here, and the best way for us to understand that is to understand what are the interests of that foreign power and to see how they will be using all the means they have to commit interference in Canada. Question. So in the institutional report, and if we consult the Act, we can see that also. We see that CSIS has certain powers that can be carried out with or without legal authorization, judicial authorization, and I'd like to hear you about one of these tools that exists for CSIS, and these are the threat reduction measures that are at Article 12.1 of the CSIS Act, and I would like to ask the clerk to bring up CanDoc 18.3, please. So my question is general, but still in the context of foreign interference, but I'd like you to explain what these threat reduction measures are, and the document here is simply a visual aid, but I'd like to have a general explanation from one of you. Answer. Yes, I will answer the question, says Mrs. Tessier. As indicated in the document, since 2015, the CSIS has this tool, this mandate, and to differentiate it with the main mandate of the service, that is to collect intelligence, to analyze and to distribute intelligence, it is really measures to reduce the threat, to stop the threat if possible, but to reduce it. And there's a lot of evolution in 2019 following a law from 2017. There were changes in the CSIS Act to put more parameters on the constraints, the measures that we cannot undertake, such as create injuries or detain individuals, such things. And this explains when the service needs a mandate, under which conditions it needs to get a warrant, so as to undertake these threat reduction measures. So the aim was really to enable the service to have this tool of fighting the threat without it going strictly into the collection, analysis, or exchange of intelligence. Question. And when you say that at some moments the measure has to be authorized in a judicial manner, why is that warrant required in some circumstances? Answer. Well, we always have to respect the Charter, but if there are certain measures that require to limit some individuals' rights under the Charter, we need a warrant from the federal court, and if it could violate one of Canada's acts. But even without judicial authority, so as to undertake a measure, I'd like to underline here that we have to have reasonable reasons, and those are the same reasons for the service to go get a warrant under Article 12. So it's still a high threshold to meet to enable the service to undertake these threat reduction measures.
And we see in Annex J, that's on the screen, the notion of proportionality. And it also is in the institutional report. The notion of risk is itemized, and it's associated to the TRMs. Can you explain to us the concept of proportionality and risk reduction related to these measures? Yes, absolutely. Response. So it has to be proportional, the reduction measure has to be proportional to the threat. So first of all, the activities, in other words, the activities that we undertake must be able to reduce the threat, and we have to be able to assess it at short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and we want the measures to be proportional. They mustn't be too broad, and the Act also asks us to work with other partners. For example, if there's a criminal investigation, then we can't hinder the investigation and ongoing criminal investigation. So we have to make sure that no other government entity is taking measures that we could, in fact, be weakening or compromising before we undertake our own. So you don't have any police powers. So the RCMP has police powers. So if you can't answer my question, let me know, even if it's me that's asking it. But just so that everybody can understand, when you talk about a measure, a TRM, or threat reduction measure, can you give us an idea, not necessarily a concrete example, but explain to us, what are we talking about? Give us an example. Yes, of course. Answer. I can give you some examples. I am limited as to what I can tell you. So let's say we can divide it into three categories. So dissuasion is the first category. So this involves disseminating information. So a candidate in election campaign, if we disclose classified information, we can disclose classified information on an individual to reduce the threat. When it comes to exploitation, and then we work with a third party, so they have the means to reduce the threat. So not a third party in government, because you can exchange information freely within the government. So I'll give you an example. So it has to be somebody outside the government. If there's an organization that, this is hypothetical, but we have an association, for example, that organizes an event, and they've invited conference speakers, and we have information that there are foreign interests at work that are trying to introduce an individual and fund him who is going to manipulate the conference for his own ends, his or her own ends. And we will inform that association in that case so that they might change the program or cancel the engagement of the said speaker. The third category is a bit more difficult to explain, but it's when the service uses its own means to reduce the measures. Supposing there's a disinformation campaign and the service decides to reduce the message or countervail it, we have means at our disposal to do that. So just to give you an idea of what we can do in the face of foreign interference. And there are four pillars in the concept of risk. There's an operational risk that the service will assess on its own. And then there's also a legal or judicial risks. And so we work with the Justice Department. There are reputational risks, a reputation of the government, for example. And so we'll work with public safety. And we also work in cooperation with the Public Security Department and also the risk to our international relationships. And I'm trying to slow down. I'm aware that I'm speaking very quickly. So that's Global Affairs, who is the prime interlocutor, and all depending of the level of the risk, then we will seek out approvals for the measures. And so these approvals, these approvals, do these measures have to be approved by higher instances within the service? Answer, yes. It has to be approved by the director and the minister for average, medium risk. It has to be a senior official within the service. And minor risk is just a first line manager. Yes, question. Let's look at document 2919. Please. It's a memorandum from, it's a memo from the director to the minister. I'll ask the clerk to scroll down. So we understand, Mr. Vigneault, that this document has been partially redacted. In general, can you give us a bit of context as to the nature of this document? When would this kind of memorandum be sent? Mr. Clerk, can you come up to the top of the document, please? So in this case, Madame the Commissioner, as Madame Sévigné mentioned, when we do a risk assessment, when the risk is high, then the corresponding threat reduction measure has to be approved at higher levels. So it's not sufficient to just inform the minister, but also to get his approval before we proceed. So in this case, if we look at this memo, it says for information. So without having read all of the content of the memo, I can explain the process. So I will inform the minister that we are contemplating taking a measure, and we may not require his authorization if the risk is not high, and this is the case, and we present the details of the situation or the operation to the minister, and we describe the threat and what the measures, the countervailing measures will be. We'll also outline the results and the risks to the four pillars, And so this is my way of informing the Minister of what we are contemplating. Once again, this measure is in compliance with the Act, and so we're not asking the Minister to necessarily authorize, but we are informing the Minister of what we are doing. And in this way, the Minister can therefore discuss whatever issues arise with myself or my colleagues, and that's why this information process exists. And so, question from the Commissioner, can the Minister say, I don't agree? Answer, yes, absolutely. There is, of course, our authority is a delegated authority from the Minister, so the Minister does retain the possibility of expressing his disagreement. Now, it's never happened, not since the last 7 years anyway, but it is theoretically possible for the Minister to disagree. Generally, we try to avoid surprises, so we do have conversations with the political office of the Minister and the public safety personnel, so that when the memo lands, there is no surprise, because everybody has been more or less surprised of the situation, and they are then, and everybody's always receptive to this kind of discussion. Commissioner's question, so they don't have the power to direct you. Nothing outside the answer, nothing outside of the directive, ministerial directives. So to summarize, the TRM must be sent to the Surveillance Committee, the National Surveillance Committee, the National Committee, and to the Minister. So in general, in the annual report of the service that we sent to the Minister, there is a list of all the measures that were invoked during that year. And all of these measures are reviewed systematically. So we can remove this document from the screen, and I do want to leave a bit of time to my colleague Mike Cameron. So I'm going to ask you to quickly explain to us the role that plays CSIS in the intelligence community in Canada, and also, as a corollary, what is the relationship between CSIS and the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor?
So, thank you for the question.
Answer.
We work extremely closely with what we would call the security and intelligence community in Canada, and we have very close relationships with all of our partners. We work very hard to appreciate and understand the intelligence requirements of the government, and in that vein, we also work very hard to make sure that we're responding to those requirements so that we are appropriately collecting and disseminating the required information.
Peut-être, Mr. Mackay, pour élaborer également sur le...
And just to elaborate a little bit on the point, the relationship between the NSIA and CSIS, I've had the opportunity before I was appointed director of working for 5 years as a secretary to the cabinet in the area of intelligence. So I worked in close cooperation with people who have been previously were the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister. So there is a daily communication between the CSIS and the Prime Minister's advisor, and there are also daily communications between various members of our office, and at my level as a director, I think that I can say that I have many times a week conversations and weekly meetings with the NSIA, and we talk very frequently, even late at night, early in the morning, weekends included, because of course the national security space in Canada is a very complex one, and so we maintain very close ties. And is there anything else I should add?
So I had the opportunity actually to work within PCO. I was the Chief of Staff to the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, Danielle Jean, at the time. it became very apparent of the importance of excellent communication between PCO and ourselves within the service, just to start to educate on what the service was, who we were, and what we could bring to the table to support the ongoing need to advise government in regards to helping them in their decision-making, and also advise government in regards to the threat that we are seeing. From the services perspective, our job is to sniff the environment and figure out where the threats are coming from, and then to be able to advise and inform government on those threats and to continue to build those pictures. So it was fundamentally important to increase that relationship and continue to build that level of trust and appreciation between ourselves, PCO, and I would also add into that the rest of the national security community.
Donc maintenant, pour ce qui est de la façon dont le CRS est structuré.
Question. So, as to the way CSIS is structured on the national level, there's a central office in Ottawa, and there are other offices elsewhere in the country. Can you explain to me the broad lines of this structure and the relationship between the regional offices and the head office? Yes, well, I can answer that question. So, in effect, there's 3 subdirectors, and I'll talk about the operational deputy director, which is my role. So at the central office, at headquarters, we are managing operational programs. So we see what the priorities of the government are in matters of intelligence, and we translate those into operational requirements. So this is what's done at the head office level. So the head office deals with cases. We also do analysis. We have expert analysts that look at the broad picture, produce a documentation that is then sent back to our client departments. So that is the role of the head office, and also to prioritize investigations, determine what the priorities are. Now, we have regional offices in all the provinces except one province, none in the territories, but nevertheless, we do have people that travel and that look after the whole country. And we also have offices in other countries, abroad. So we have Paris, Washington, and London. We do not divulge the existence of other offices. And so we do have a global network. And we have a deputy director that's responsible for all of the regional offices. And we have the Directorate of Advanced Data Analysis, and we also have a Center for Operational Security, Risk Assessment, Threat Assessment. That is under Operations Management. So we have analysis, operations, all of that is under the aegis of the Director of Operations. Question. So in the interview summary, we talk about the perspective of the head office and the perspective of the regional office, and the perspective that the regional office can bring to the head office. Can you enlighten us as to or develop on that? Answer. Well, in any agency with regional offices and a headquarters, there are various different perspectives. It's only natural. And of course, regional offices are are experts on site. So, and the head office has a global vision because they deal with foreign intelligence services, and so they have a broader picture and they see what's happening not only within Canada but also abroad. So the head office is concerned with strategy, whereas the regional offices are more concerned with tactical approaches. So the regional offices do not make decisions as to the allotment of resources. They will decide how they are going to deal with a particular request or need. So which means are they going to use? That's a decision that is up to the regional office. Of course, some regional offices think that their investigation is more important than some other regions, but I think it's very healthy to have a conflation of various perspectives because it gives us a richer picture and produces a richer discussion.
It's also very important to realize that our headquarters is also plugged into the government and appreciates what the priorities of the government are at the end of the day. And so it's through headquarters and that liaison with making sure we're responding to the priorities of the government that we can also then send out the appropriate intelligence requirements to the regions. And that can also create a little bit of a tension, but as Michelle noted, it's a healthy tension that is normal in an organization. Two different perspectives, but help to move the organization forward and do appropriate collection.
Question maintenant sur les produits.
Question on the products that CSIS produces in the context of its activities. So I'm going to ask you a question, a general question on the kinds of products, but I'll also ask you to answer the following question. How do you decide which products are going to be distributed and who they're going to be given to and how they will be distributed?
As I noted, the service works also very closely with the PCO in order to understand and appreciate the intelligence priorities of the government. We play into that decision-making process. Once we have an appreciation of what those intelligence priorities are, we are able to send that tasking out to the region into what the service can collect under its mandate in regards to the priorities of the government. Once that is done and the region is collecting the information, we can review the information coming in to determine which government department would see value in receiving that reporting. There are different types of reports that are disseminated. One is just a basic intelligence report, raw intelligence, which allows the user to determine how that intelligence can support what they are doing. We also do a stronger but smaller analytical piece where we will pull various pieces together to start to create the intelligence picture. And then we will also produce in-depth assessments. There is good communication among the S&I community, and through the process of setting intelligence priorities, the service also gets an appreciation of which government department wants which type of information, and we will then appropriately disseminate that. We also try to get feedback back from the various departments to make sure that we're actually meeting their intelligence requirements. That's an ongoing process that we're working on improving constantly, but that feedback fits very well into trying to make sure that we're hitting the intelligence priorities of the government as well as those departments.
Et est-ce que le niveau de classification
And is the level of classification of a document of an information can have an impact on the distribution of the document in question?
We always, when we do disseminate our reports and our intelligence, we want to make sure that we've got as much of the picture as we have. And so so I'm going to just back up a moment there. When we draft an analytical piece, we pull all the pieces together of intelligence. Some is from a corroborated source, some may be from a new source, but we feel it's very important to have that whole picture, and we have very well-trained analysts who are subject matter experts who help to pull that picture together. Then what we do is we determine who needs to see that report. In some cases, based on the sensitivity of the information, how it's collected and the methodologies, we need to protect those sources. And so we will make what we would call a bigot list of information or individuals that can actually see that reporting, and we will disseminate that reporting to those particular individuals on a named distribution list.
Lorsque vous
When you are disseminating information within the government to government clients, do you have any expectations in terms of feedback from the clients who receive this information? Does the service have any expectations in terms of feedback?
Yes, we work very hard with other government departments to get feedback. We have actually in the last couple of years, excuse me, created an ADM, a much more communicative ADM team that can actually discuss the various reports to make sure that, one, we're not only getting feedback on the report, but if we determine that there's information in there that is actionable, which government department could action that potentially under their mandate and how that could be done. So there is very good cooperation amongst the S&I community, the security and intelligence community, at the ADM and DG and working levels. We have very good communication on that front. Feedback is fundamentally important because it makes sure that we are allocating our resources in the right way. If we determine that there is a particular piece of information that needs to get instant or very quick urgent action or attention, we will actually not just disseminate that through an electronic means, but we will make sure we brief that verbally and get the appropriate parties engaged on that piece of information.
Mr. Mackay, if I can just add very quickly, feedback is also fundamental for the reason of making sure that intelligence doesn't live on its own. We're producing intelligence because we want to help someone to take an action or to be better informed. And so that feedback is critical for CSIS to make sure, as my colleague just mentioned, make sure that we're meeting those requirements, but informed astute customers will also have information that when they pass that on to us, it enriches the picture. And when you look at the goal or the intent of intelligence, which is to inform and allow for actions to be taken, it's when you have the best picture possible that is you hopefully you'll make the best possible decisions. So that's why it's another reason why feedback is critical.
Thank you. I will let my colleague, Mr. Cameron, take over from me.
Thank you, panelists. I'd like to begin by directing a question that I think is specific to Mr. Vigneault, because it has to do with your decision as director of the service over the years of your term to decide to either engage, or as the case might be, re-engage the public on the topic of foreign interference, because in general, the operations of the service are necessarily secret, but we now see foreign interference part of the public discussion. And I'd like to have your perspective on the occasion, or at least the era in which you decided it was time to become public about this.
Madam Commissioner, that's a very important question, and I touched upon this in my first appearance for Part D of the inquiry. And CSIS is an institution that has been created by law to have secrets and to keep secrets. But that doesn't mean that, we are not part of we don't have something that we need to tell Canadians, and that the transparency is essential in a democracy. The threat environment has evolved significantly over the last number of years. Learned scholars and analysts of the national security have said they've never seen such a complex threat environment, and that includes the Cold War. And so when you look at this environment, there is something in a democracy that the intelligence service can and should be engaging with Canadians in terms of transparency of some of the information.
Just tell me what you see in the last years.
I would say
what do you mean? Are you talking about 20 years, or are you talking about 2, 3, 4 years?
So I would say that there are a couple of moments. 9/11 has been a moment, a pivotal point in terms of international terrorism and the way that terrorist groups could use their means to inflict casualties and terror. Not only in foreign countries, but also in our own countries. And Canada has not been immune to terrorism. So that was one moment, and the terrorism has evolved over the last few years, 5, 7, 8 years, where we also see not just the religiously motivated extremism, but the ideologically motivated extremism. So people who are looking at, are motivated by xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, to essentially use violence and engage in act of terror in our country. And we have, unfortunately, too many recent cases in our country, and the most recent cases have been Canadians, Muslim Canadians who have been killed in our country by IMV actors, ideologically actors. So terrorism has evolved. The other significant evolution has been the international order is changing. So we have Russia and the PRC, People's Republic of China, who are challenging the international order even more so in the last 5, 7, 10 years. We see it through incursions. We see it, of course, in Ukraine, where Russia is engaging in illegal invasion. We see it in the South China Sea, where the People's Republic of China is withdrawing international maritime borders for their own benefit. Despite very clear international law rulings on this. We see it in terms of how they are coercing a number of other countries. So great power politics is that, we have not seen as much in the last number of last 20 years or so. We see a resurgence of Russia, China, a number of other countries challenging the international order. And so that environment is getting more and more complex. The last thing I would say in the threat environment, Madam Commissioner, to answer your question, is the evolution of technology. We see it through how technology is a force of good in many ways in terms of societal goods, economic prosperity. But of course, like anything else, we have actors who are using the advancement of technology for their own purposes. So Canada now has to protect itself against threats from new weapon systems from Russia over the Arctic, for example. We have to use, the benefits of social media and of Internet of Things and the ability of communications systems to be part of our society is also leverage. And then the specific case of foreign interference for nefarious purposes here in our. So this is the backdrop, Mr. Cameron, to the reason why in 2018 made first public speech as director to engage Canadians and share some of our perspective of this threat environment. And in that speech in 2018, specifically mentioned foreign interference as one of the most significant threat Canada was facing. And over the years, we have continued to engage publicly to our annual reports, speeches, but also by reallocating resources internally and creating an engagement, stakeholder engagement branch within CSIS to go out and meet with non-traditional partners and very importantly, meet with diaspora communities because they're unfortunately one of the most significant target of foreign interference.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Vigneault, your organization produces an annual public report, correct?
Yes.
And one of the documents, and just for the assistance of parties and those following along, this is in the database as 17001. The service filed a cluster of your public reports for 2019, 2020, 2021, and some other reports. I just want to take you briefly through the evolution of the service's public pronouncements on foreign interference. And I don't know if you've got, if court officer, could you just scroll down a bit and tell us which one you've got there? No. Okay, but perhaps you could call up COM 54. I mention that just because it's the 2019 report, the 2020 report, 2019 report published in 2020, and it's by itself. It's not in the cluster of documents at 17.01. COM 54. Scroll to the bottom just so we can see if the page number, yeah, you see go to 17 of the document, please, not the PDF. Okay, and back up. So here we see in your 2019 public report, the service's attention to the topic here under the heading Protecting Democratic Institutions. We have a couple of paragraphs on what ends up being a discussion of, in terminology we might now refer to more directly as foreign interference. And this followed on, this appearance in the service's public report followed on your 2018 speech, and I take it this was part of the arc of alerting the public to this element of the threat?
Absolutely. You see the service trying to put more and more specific details in our annual reports. This one in 2020 was an example of that progression. We also, since then, produced other reports in collaboration with our partners within the government to try to alert Canadians in an organized way about foreign interference. And so I believe it was in 2020 or 2021, we published a report called Foreign Interference in Democratic Institutions. It was very specifically tailored to the democratic processes. And we have also, because as I mentioned, one of the main targets of foreign interference are Canadian diaspora. And so what we, or diaspora in Canada. And so what we have done is produce a document called Foreign Interference in You, specifically tailored to diaspora in Canada and published in the 7 languages to try to engage directly with people who would be the victims of transnational repression and foreign interference.
Thank you. Well, you've covered off a few of my coming questions, but just if I can put this in an arc of progress over time, would I be correct in observing that from your initial speech in 2018 through the 2019 public report on through 2020 public report and then your publication in the summer of 2021 of this report we're going to come to specific about foreign interference and then onwards, the service is becoming more detailed and more expansive in describing to Canadians the threat of foreign interference?
Absolutely. This is what we internally, and I've said it I think publicly a few times, but this is what we call the sunshine policy on foreign interference.
Okay. Now, on that point, in particular about the service's attention to the impact of foreign interference on diaspora groups, you mentioned the document, and court operator, perhaps again, because it's easier to find it in COM 322 than buried in the middle of 17.01. There is the report you just described, Mr. Vigneault. And if you could just, again, you describe this as a topic-specific report. I think it's 17 or 20 pages, but it goes into, the whole report is focused, as I understand from the title, not just on foreign interference, but specifically foreign interference in relation to democratic processes. So at this point, what is motivating the service to put this much of its resources into alerting the public to this threat?
I would say it's twofold, Madam Commissioner. First, it's because, again, the nature of the threat. We have seen, because of globalization and technology, the ability of foreign interference to increase in speed, impact, and reach within Canadian society. So that's one of the things, the evolution of the threat. But also, very importantly, this is at the time where the community, CSIS working with all of our partners in collaboration, realizing that there more needed to be done. And this is contemporary to approaches like the creation of the site task force, the panel that the government created to supervise elections. Learning from the experiences that we saw in other jurisdictions where there was interference in their electoral democratic processes, and essentially CSIS, in this specific case, our partners at the Communication Security Establishment also produced a similar report in terms of on the cyber world, interference on the cyber world, and this is very much, a individual contribution, but very much as part of the all-of-government approach to try to engage on foreign interference and better educate Canadians about foreign interference.
Thank you. And perhaps the court operator could scroll down to page 8 of the document. Thank you. Now, the heading of this section is Canadian public and voters. Just have a quick look at that, Mr. Vigneault, and please, Madam Tessier and Ms. Henderson, if you want to add here. But in particular, you've mentioned, Mr. Vigneault, that the service was alert to the impact of foreign interference, or as it might arise in this context, or accurately called transnational repression, with respect to diaspora groups, and that ends up occupying a couple of pages of this particular report. Can you look at that section there and explain how the service views the interrelationship of foreign interference as it manifests in transnational repression and the importance of educating the public?
Yes, this is a very important point, Madam Commissioner. The mandate of CSIS is very clear, so we have to produce intelligence and have an impact writ large to protect all Canadians. And here what we see in the context of foreign interference is we see foreign countries trying to have a negative impact on Canada's institution, but also very specifically having an impact in trying to control or influence the members of diaspora in Canada. So the home country, if I can put it this way, trying to control what people are engaging in terms of their democratic activities, controlling what they're saying, who they're engaging with, and in this specific case in democratic institutions, also trying to influence covertly, so foreign interference, the way they may vote, and so this is why it is important that we see the work that we do and all of our partners do to protect all Canadians, and we are very specifically aware that the way that diaspora communities in Canada are being impacted.
Okay, and if the court officer could pull up Can Sum 5, and we can get a bit more specific. This document, I've got the right number, will be the country summary for the People's Republic of China. There's a page of caveats, and if we can scroll down to the first page of substance, I just, because acronyms end up getting used in this document, I'll just ask you to, you've already defined for us PRC. I think that's an initialism we're now familiar with. The third full paragraph makes reference to the Chinese Communist Party and the CCP, as it's called there, and then in the last paragraph on this page, the United Front Work Department. So I'm going to ask you to flesh this out a little bit, the role of those entities, but can you just describe for us, if you look over, can you scroll to the next page, please, Mr. Thank you. Under who, there's an entire, indeed the whole section of this topical summary on the PRC as a country being covered in this summary. This whole section is about the service's description of its interest in transnational repression. And so the question I have, the documents we were looking at so far, your annual or public reports, your report on foreign interference, were about foreign interference and possibly transnational repression, generally speaking. Can you tell us here in particular how the service views the issue of transnational repression as it relates to the PRC, the People's Republic of China?
Madam Commissioner, I would take us back to one thing I said a few minutes ago, which is for us to better understand and have an impact on foreign interference, we want to understand what are the objectives and the interests of the foreign state who is engaging in that activity. In this specific case, the People's Republic of China is the country is governed and is dominated by the Chinese Communist Party, and the key element here is that you can look to the prism of the actions of the Chinese Communist Party and therefore the People's Republic of China into one very specific issue, which is everything that is organized by the party and by the state is to preserve l'emprise, preserve the power of the Chinese Communist Party and its perennity over time. And so when you understand that, and then you translate that into what is happening in Canada at the moment, this is why you always see in this document the reference to the 5 poisons. The 5 poisons are themes and issues that people who have objection to what is happening in China are raising. Issues like, liberty of religion, of thought with the Falun Gong, issues of protection of minority rights, the Uyghurs, and the Tibetans, issues related to pro-democracy movement. And so when you look at these issues, so the people who are here in Canada, protected by the Charter, protected by our laws, are exercising their democratic rights to engage and in a pacific way, manifest their views. Understanding where China's interest is, which is the preservation of the Chinese Communist Party's emprise, you can understand how anything that would be seen as a threat to the Chinese Communist Party is being dealt with very harshly. And this is why, for example, we have seen over the last number of years in the PRC, 5-6 years, legislation, very, very transparent legislation that are directed at making sure that every person in China or any entity in China or abroad are subjected to these laws and have the obligation to support the government, including their intelligence service, the Ministry of State Security, the MSS, in order to accomplish their task. So that direct and implied threat that if you are not supporting, even if you're here in Canada, in Ottawa, or you're in Paris, or you're in Trois-Rivières, you will be subjected. The arm of the PRC can touch you directly and indirectly in a way that people understand that they have this element of coercion on top of them. That coercion translates into things that may be done to you in Canada, loss of opportunity, loss of access, denial of visas to go back to see your family members back in the PRC, threats to you here, but also threats to your families, your loved ones back in China. So that ecosystem, starting from the party, translating into the actions of the state, and now they're reaching out anywhere around the world to try to control what is happening with the Chinese population, is what this specific paragraph is about. There are other elements of foreign interference that we can touch upon, but specifically this paragraph, I think, is the...
So if I can just add a couple of things. First of all, foreign interference is not new. It's something that we've been looking at for a long time. I would say even before the 1990s. It's been around a long time. What we have seen in the last few years is a real increase as the geopolitical environment has shifted, and we have seen some of the nations become much more powerful in their own right and their desire to influence further beyond their borders. So we've been watching this. There are many individuals who have come to Canada and are Canadian citizens that have fled those repressive regimes in order to come here. And now what we are seeing is they are being coerced, forced, repressed within our borders. And so the service is there to work with those communities as well, to collect intelligence and information to help protect all Canadians. And what we have seen over the past few years, as I said, is an increase in that effort to have that negative influence and impact and coerce those individuals who have come here to live in under our values and freedoms in order to report and support their originating country's beliefs. So it's something that we are very, very alive to.
Thank you. And I'll switch gears now and ask you just very briefly, Mr. Vignon, because we have panels appear, site panels and others that deal with the intelligence that comes out of your organization. But I just want you to just get us ready for tomorrow and those panels by describing your conception of the site task force and how CSIS relates to it.
So I mentioned, Madam Commissioner, earlier that we have seen what has happened in other countries since 2016, 2018, in different jurisdictions where we saw foreign interference in democratic processes potentially have impacts. And so when we were getting ready for the election in 2019, we're trying to understand what would be the right lessons to draw from what we knew, working with our intelligence partners around the world. And so my colleague, the Chief Communication Security Establishment, the National Security Intelligence Advisor at the time, and myself determined that we needed to find a way to bring the information together to make sure that there was a clearinghouse of the intelligence and the information, that we'd be able to have that in real time to make sure that we did not have silos of information while the election was underway. And that was the genesis of the site task force. It was this recognition that we needed to do things differently because the threat was different and the impact on our elections, was so important. And so that's the genesis of the site task force. And it's, I'll let my colleagues from the Privy Council office elaborate, but it's the same thought process that, led to the creation of the panel as well, was the realization that the threat was different. The way it could have an impact on our electoral process was more direct, more imminent, and we needed to organize ourselves differently. And so that's why the site task force.
Okay, thank you. And we'll get...
I have a question.
Sorry, please.
For Mr. Vignon. Vous nous avez dit, Monsieur Vignon,
You said, Mr. Vignon, I think it was you, Madame Henderson and Madame Tessier. I will address you if somebody else can add to what you're going to say. An expertise, which is very important to you within CSIS to collect information to analyze and inform the government. Those are the essential tasks, or the reason for your existence is basically to inform the government, be it in terms of site, TF, or other people within departments. They don't necessarily have the same experience as people within CSIS. We also know that there are often changes, particularly within the government, with regard to who is in what position. Up to now, the experience that you have, which is fairly broad, does that give you the impression that there's a veritable dialogue, or what is communicated by CSIS is understood by those within government, and vice versa? In other words, do the two sides speak the same language when you are communicating information, be it from site or be it from people within the public service or political person? That's response. That's an absolutely fundamental question, Madam Commissioner. A few thoughts that I can share with you. What we are experiencing now in 2024, I think we're in a better position than we were in 2017, 2018. We've seen the evolution of that understanding. The growth is carried out not only within us, within CSIS and our other partners, but truly understanding the needs of the government, the language and all of that in order to be able to be more relevant with our information and also to ensure that the information arrives at the right time. So we have had growth, and I can say that there's been growth as well with our partners in the understanding of what is foreign interference. The discussions that we had in 2019 are no longer the same discussions that we're having today. So there's been that change. And that growth has taken place on both sides, I would say. We understand better how our information is received and how it can be used, the limits of what we know, but also from our partners who understand better that how to pay attention to what we say and make sure that they ask questions on the information that is shared. And also, one of the important things that we've seen with the lessons learned, if you will, the last 2 or 3 years, a change in governance as well. So the right people are in the right positions, speaking with the right intelligence. It can seem quite simple to say that here, but in an environment where the demand outstrips the ability of organizations to find the right space with the right people to be able to discuss very delicate and complex matters, such as foreign interference, it took a change in governance. And the discussions are very tight. We've asked questions, and it's a very dynamic environment. And more, the question is not necessarily knowing seeing the difference between whether the information is correct or not, but it's rather a matter of saying, what do we do with that information? What are the actions that will be taken? Some actions will be for us to take, to go and obtain more information, more intelligence, but a concrete example that I can give you as well, which is in the sphere of foreign interference and spy activities, is work done on the Investment Act in Canada. If you see the evolution of what's known publicly, the decisions that are made, the way that work is done internally, you can see that information has a more important impact than it had in the past because people speak to each other better. Once again, we have the right governance, and the way in which national interests of Canada can be at risk are better understood by everybody. Therefore, the acting with us in operations, it was seen as something apart. And when I became Assistant Director of Operations, we discussed, but we said we need to have a better way of integrating our knowledge as experts, including within the service and operations. Before that, we used a lot of information officers who gave presentations or who met with other departments of the government. But I am an information intelligence officer, and now we've amalgamated analysis and operations together in order to better respond to the requirements in terms of intelligence, but also our analysts now, who are experts, who are really the face of the service because they have a strategic vision. They're brilliant. The people in information are also brilliant, but they're focused on operations. But in order to try to better share their knowledge with clients, with the people who receive our information. And when CITE was created, I'm taking a step back here, but when CITE was created, it was also to look at the mandates of all of these agencies and see who's the best place to respond to the threat. Is it the RCMP? Is it Global Affairs? Is it CSIS? In order to better understand the role of each player in terms of a foreign interference, or when it comes to foreign interference.
Panelists, in the interest of
intervenants.
Topics and try to be efficient by directing you to the documents so that you can these are topics on which in your in-camera evidence you've already spoken, so I'm going to take you to those sections. But if we could first, Mr. Court Operator, pull up CAN 4728, just briefly. Okay, just a few questions about this, and panelists, you spoke about this document. This is a CSIS National Security Brief with the heading Foreign Interference in the 2019 Federal Campaign of Dong Han. And if you could now, Court Operator, pull up WIT 48, where, and if you can go to page 5 of that document, or in particular paragraph 15. This document, Madam Commissioner, is the public summary of the in-camera appearance of these same three witnesses. And panelists, at paragraph 15, you see your discussion of this document, in particular the circumstances in which it was recalled. And so using, so that you don't have to repeat yourself and so that you are guided by what you have already decided can be publicly said about this in these words, can you give the Commissioner just an overview of the history of this document and why it ended up being discussed in your in-camera evidence?
Absolutely. So, Madam Commissioner, as we said, one of the intelligence requirements that we have is to report to government on intelligence related to foreign interference. And so specifically, we're running intelligence operations, and we are collecting information and working with partners to have the best possible understanding. This report was a classified report based on different pieces of information that the service had collected over time. And it was meant to inform the government that we had detected a number of things happening in the riding of Don Valley North, and we wanted to inform the government of that information. And so, as my colleague explained earlier, so sometimes we have the intelligence report, so raw information. We take the information and piece by piece we share with partners. In this case, a national security brief is a document that is more of a compilation, an analysis of in this case of a specific topic, interference in the specific riding, Don Valley North, and that was communicated to the government.
Okay, and for the benefit of parties, the paragraphs 15, 16, 17 of this public summary of the in-camera testimony gives the details of that incident. So let me just ask you a few overview questions about that, Mr. Vigneault. Generally speaking, what is the impact, or what happens when intelligence assessment like this is recalled?
Yeah, so recall in this case is can be for different reasons. We have come across a mistake in the report. Could be that we have provided information that was too specific, that may point to identification of a source. So there's different reasons why you would recall a report, and sometimes it's the report is recalled and reissued with corrections, with changes made. In this specific instance, when I testified in camera, as was mentioned in this summary, I could not recall the reason why this report was recalled. I again yesterday conferred with my former chief of staff, who is the individual who would ask, when I came back from discussing, I'd ask to have the document recalled. He himself did not remember the reasons why. What I am very comfortable to say, though, is that in my career, I have never been asked to censor intelligence, to change intelligence for reasons that would be exterior to CSIS operations. And so I am very comfortable, as I've said in my in-camera testimony and reported here in the unclassified document, that there was no nefarious, or it was not because there was a sensitive issue at play. It was because if it had been something like that, I would have clearly remembered, because it has never happened in my career. And
yeah, and obviously had it been something particularly controversial, the director would have shared that with me so that I instruct our employees and explain what the concerns were, and I have no memory of that incident whatsoever.
Thank you. Then just two quick mechanical questions. What actually happens when you recall a report? What is the effect of that on the people who got it in the first place?
So when we recall a report, we will send an email out to the individuals that receive the report and ask them to delete and destroy any copies that they have of that document, that is no longer a document. Within the service, often the analyst that wrote the report may still retain a copy within their database, but nobody has access to that report. That said, all the underlying information that was used to draft the report remains in the service's databases.
Thank you. That was the second question, and that's helpful there.
I have one question.
Please.
Is it something that happens regularly, recalling a report, or it's unusual?
It's not unusual, but it's not regular. Sort of in between. We will recall a report, for example, because it was disseminated maybe too broadly, and we want to reduce the dissemination. Or we'll recall a report, as the director said, because we may have misclassified a piece of information in the report, so we'll recall it too. Or we'll call it because we received a new piece of information that completely changes it. So reports can be recalled for various reasons, but it's not regular, but it's also not unheard of.
Thank you. And then one last topic, if the court officer could call up CAN 3128. And if you could just scroll down a little bit. Panelists, you're familiar, I think, with this document. Scroll down a little bit further, please. Thank you. First of all, I think I'll direct these questions to you, Ms. Henderson, but whoever has the right information should answer them. Can you tell us, or perhaps remind us, who Mr. King, well, what position he occupied at CSE and what role he was in when he sent this email?
So Mr. King was the chair of the site task force at this time in the 2019 election.
Right. And he makes several points in this email considering what he considers to have been the late delivery of intelligence, given what he, in his email, describes as the severity of the alleged activity, and he later refers to a massively problematic statement in the intelligence. Perhaps you can have reference, if it assists you, to paragraphs 19 and following of your in-camera evidence, so that you can be guided by exactly what you've decided you can say publicly about this. But the question is, can you help us understand what Mr. King is talking about here and the service's perspective on it?
So my first point that I'm going to make is I had spoken earlier about foreign interference being a long-term investigations that we have engaged on in the service. So when we're talking about site and site being set up, site was managing issues that happened during the writ period. but our investigations have begun long before the writ period. And so any information that we would have collected on certain foreign interference activities prior to that point would have been shared with our regular stakeholders. And I spoke about the S&I community members. So we would have shared any information that we collected in an investigation that spoke of foreign interference with our regular partners. That would include CSE, Foreign Affairs, Public Safety, RCMP, etc. So what happened in this particular instance is that based on a previous investigation, our analysts in the service had begun drafting a report. I think we're looking at an issue of timing here. So when that report was then finalized and drafted and came out, right after the 2019 election. There was a line in that report that talked about, and I'm just going to find it here.
Find your discussion of it in the public version of the transcript.
So there was a line in the report that said that the actor has already had an impact on the 2019 federal election and will remain a foreign interference threat after the election. So that is the report that was brought to the attention of the site task force after the 2019 election. And so when Mr. King read that report, he was very concerned that there was not enough information shared during site on that issue. When we took a look back at the report and the assessment, we felt internally that that was a bit of a leap too far. The threat actor would have had an impact on that particular time frame, that particular issue, but that would not have impacted the integrity of the 2019 election. It was just a little bit of a too strong of an assessment. So the information in the report still stood. It was the analytical assessment at the end that we had an internal discussion and determined that no, the language is a bit strong, and so we rewrote that particular piece and resubmitted the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are my questions for this panel.
Thank you. Cross-examination. I think the first one is, just let me look at is counsel for Michael Chong.
I believe we were scheduled for a break at 20 to 4. I wonder if we could break now and cross afterwards.
Yes, because the break was supposed to be at 3:40.
I believe so.
Yes, we can break and we'll come back but can we say we'll come back at 4:15? Thank you.
Order, please. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. This hearing is in recess until 4:15.
While they are processing the specific information you convey, but also a number of other pieces of information they have. So I think that is probably the best way to describe very formal to very informal, very specifically discussed, the topic that was planned to be discussed to a meeting that takes you in a completely different direction.
And with all of that in mind, Director, I'll just ask you one last question about this document, which is the conclusion you see at the bottom of the page there. That repeats some of the language that we saw in the other notes. So I'll just ask you again whether you recall conveying this to the PMO in the February 2023 meeting or otherwise.
Again, Madam Commissioner, my recollection of this meeting was on a very specific reference to a media article, and so I would not have used the more of the generic language about foreign interference. But what I think is instructive here is again, my staff working to prepare material for me is using, again, that expression, low risk, high reward. And so, again, it's because it's an expression I have used many times in different fora. And that's why I think you see it, again, repeated there.
Thank you. Madam Commissioner, those are my questions for the witness.
Thank you, Ms. Chaudhry. So we'll start the cross-examination. The first one will be conducted by counsel for Michael Chong.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll ask the court operator to turn up 15842 again. Director, thank you for the evidence you've given so far. It's been extremely helpful for us all to understand your process. Let me ask you in a general way whether you are able to confirm that this document as a whole reflects the service's views on the matters that it addresses.
Madam Commissioner, I had the chance to review the material, and I do believe that it does indeed reflect the views of the service. My personal views as a director of the service, there are one or two nuances I would make on these different points. There's also the fact that, you know, our knowledge and understanding continues to evolve. So something that was drafted in 2022 would evolve in 2024. But overall, I think it is a very useful tool for someone to see very specific information with examples of what foreign interference is in Canada and in our democratic institutions.
Thank you, sir. That's very helpful. The next question I have for you is about the passage that Ms. Chaudhry showed you about the being slower than our Five Eyes allies. I think it was at page 2. My question is simply, and you may have already said this, but I want to make sure I've got it. Have you ever communicated this particular assessment about us being slower than our Five Eyes allies to either the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office?
Madam Commissioner, I can say with confidence that this is something that has been conveyed to the government, to ministers, the Prime Minister, using these words and other types of words. We often, in order to make sure we understand, have the best possible assessment of a situation, we often look to other jurisdictions to see what is their own analysis of the threat, what tools they have put in place. And so the comparative analysis of with the Five Eyes, but also with other like-minded nations who have similar political systems as ours, or Western democracies. You know, doing the comparative analysis is a very useful tool, both from an intelligence point of view, but also from a policy point of view. So I can say with a high degree of confidence that, you know, these examples, I've used them in both private briefings, but also in my speeches, public speeches, in CSIS annual reports, in parliamentary testimony. Just this past week, I was in testifying in front of the Canada-China Committee in the House of Commons, and I used same kind of analysis on different topics linked to foreign interference. So yes, to question to the council, this has been conveyed.
Thank you. And I take it your answer would be the same for the passage at page 3 about there being no consequences, legal or political, for state actors who conduct foreign interference. Have I got that right?
Yes, Madam Commissioner. I elaborated on that point with previous questions, answers, sorry. But yes, it is accurate to say that, you know, I have said, use these expressions. And indeed, this one very specifically, low risk, high reward endeavor.
Thank you. Now, this document, as we were hearing, was something that was prepared in advance of an oral briefing that you were going to give the Prime Minister on the 27th of October. We heard evidence from the Prime Minister on Wednesday that his preferred working method in intelligence matters is to rely on oral briefings rather than briefing notes. Is that a method of working that you were aware of before you heard his evidence about that on Wednesday? Is that something that you have been alive to and have sort of adjusted your practices to meet?
Madam Commissioner, I can say that in my experience, I have used both methods. Specific material that has been written and provided to the Prime Minister, intelligence assessments or information, but also verbal briefings. So in my experience, both methods have been used, depending on the situation, depending on the context, depending on timing. But I have used both methods of briefing.
All right. And in the event that, let me back up and ask you this. We heard the Prime Minister say that these notes were not provided to him, and I don't think you dispute that because they were meant to be your notes, not notes for him. Am I right?
Yes, Madam Commissioner. I did not have a chance to see all the proceedings of the commission. I'm sorry, Madam Commissioner, but I have seen. I saw that specific reference from the Prime Minister, and my recollection of the briefing is exactly the same.
Thank you. All right. And is it your understanding then that in order to ensure that the Prime Minister or his office has been briefed on a matter to do with intelligence, you should ensure that there is an oral briefing that has taken place?
Excuse me, Commissioner, my understanding was we're talking about these three documents, and it appears to me at least that we're venturing away from that now, and that that question is outside the scope of this cross-examination.
Commissioner, I'm content to hear your ruling on
you're
that.
you're just on mute, Commissioner.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'll just ask Maid Vanner to explain the relationship between his question and the three documents.
My concern is simply that given that this document was not delivered to the Prime Minister, and that the Prime Minister's preferred method of receiving intelligence briefings is orally, I wanted to ensure that the material in this was conferred to him one way or another. It sounds like it wasn't in the October meetings, but of course the Director has had other briefings with the Prime Minister in the past. And so just given the working methods that the Prime Minister prefers, I'm wondering whether the CSIS ensures that everything that is sent over in writing is also briefed orally.
I will permit the question.
So, Madam Commissioner, the way that I think has been testified to by different people is CSIS would be preparing material and intelligence reports and assessments, and that is distributed to the Privy Council office. So I believe that the National Security Intelligence Advisor has testified to that, but I can say it is my understanding that the material is then processed by the Privy Council office, the National Security Intelligence Advisor's office, to be produced to the Prime Minister. So we have, as I testified, I have used both methods, so a specific material and briefing material in writing, and also those verbal briefings. What I think is important is that all of that is underpinned by intelligence products that are with the Privy Council office, and then are able they're able to disseminate that to the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister as required. So I think it's important to understand that this is, if I can use the expression, an ecosystem. It is not just one method, one person, but you have those verbal briefings, those written briefings, and intelligence products. And I think this is how we have to understand how we are conveying information, engaging in discussions, answering questions throughout the year, if you want.
Thank you. Commissioner, I have one question about document 4495, and then I'll be done. If you could pull that up, please, Mr. Clerk. And if you go, please, to page 2, about 1/3 down. There we are. Yes. Director, it's the bullet point. We know that the PRC clandestinely and deceptively interfered in both the 2019 and 2021 general elections. Is this knowledge something that you or the service as a body have communicated to the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office?
Madam Commissioner, it is indeed something that has been communicated. I believe that I testified to that in where I said in our assessment we saw foreign interference in both the 2019 and 2021 elections. However, I concur with the result of the panel, the conclusion of the panel, that this interference did not amount to having had the impact on the general election. So I think it's important to understand that both statements, in my opinion, are true at the same time. We saw foreign interference during those elections, and that interference was indeed clandestine and deceptive. And at the same time, that interference did not amount to have an impact on the integrity of the election.
And if I may just finally follow up on this one point, if you're able to say, Director, and I appreciate you may not be, are you able to say whether the interference referred to in this bullet is limited to Don Valley North in 2019 and Steveston or Richmond East in 2021, or whether it's broader?
I think, Madam Commissioner, the best way to answer the question is refer back to the summary that the government has published in public to the Commission as made public regarding the specific information on the 11 candidates and 13 staff members.
Understood. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. So next one is Counsel for Erin O'Toole.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Don Jarman, Director Vigneault. Clerk, if you could bring up CAN 4495 again, please. And if you could scroll down to the same place we were when Mr. Van Aert was examining. Thank you. Commissioner, just following on a question that Mr. Van Aert asked, you answered him that you knew there was clandestine and deceptive interference in both elections, but it did not have an impact. Is the correct answer, as I understand the panel's conclusion, is that the impact did not meet the threshold specified in the cabinet directive?
Madam Commissioner, I'm using these words with my own understanding. I think if you go back to my exact testimony, I may have said that, I concurred with the conclusion of the panel. So I just do not want to leave the impression, because I may have used a language that is not identical in both times, that I am edging my answer, is that I have absolutely concurred with the conclusion of the panel.
Right, thank you. And just to go back to the general issue of preparation of these documents, my understanding is that this briefing note sits at the top of probably a briefing binder of maybe 70 or 80 or more pages in order to support you in the course of that meeting. Is that correct?
Madam Commissioner, maybe the best analogy I can give here is for anyone who has the chance or the opportunity to attend a parliamentary committee hearing or watch on TV a parliamentary committee hearing, there is one coming through to all of these hearings, is that you will see a senior official coming up with a big black binder, a very thick binder full of information. And I think the other thing that is universally true of these meetings is that no senior official is going through that binder from head to toe, from top to bottom in the hearing, or even for the preparation. The way the material is being put together is to help the person who's going to testify, give that person enough information, contextual information, but also very specific information. And so Mr. Jarman, yes, that's the way you describe it is this was one piece of many other pieces of briefing material that formed the what I would have used for such a meeting.
Thank you. And would the briefing note portion have been, I appreciate it wasn't given to the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office, but would the briefing note portion have been shared with the NSIA or someone at PCO in order that they would know what you were saying in that course, or what you could be anticipated to say in the course of that briefing?
Madam Commissioner, in my experience, I have seen both. Sometimes that we would have part or all of the briefing material shared in advance with the Privy Council office, and other times where no briefing material is shared ahead of time. It depends both on the issue being discussed, the specific circumstances, the timelines involved, the sensitivity of the information. So, as I said, I have and continue to see both cases where we share all or portion of the material, and cases where nothing is shared ahead of time or even left behind after.
But in this case, was this note shared with the NSIA or someone from PCO?
Madam Commissioner, I do not remember that specific note, unfortunately.
Right, thank you. And if I could direct, let's go down to the bottom in the conclusion paragraphs. So we've heard from the Prime Minister and others that there are certain generic, or it's not, generic's not the right word, certain general messages that are consistently referred to. And during meetings dealing with specific topics, that those wouldn't be conveyed because they're already understood. Are these the sorts of messages that are so consistently conveyed by you that everyone knows they're accurate and they don't need to be restated?
Madam Commissioner, if I can use the example of the specific point where it says foreign interference is therefore low risk and high reward. As I testified to a few minutes ago, I have said that repeatedly, and to the point where some colleagues are now starting to use the same vernacular.
Okay, thank you. And then can we scroll up to the page
Mr.
3?
Jarman, it's going to be your last question because your time is already over.
Thank you, Commissioner. Looking at that page 3, the comment with respect to Mr. Chu and Mr. O'Toole, thank you. These observations in that bullet that start, we also observed and ended up directed by the PRC. Those are prepared by your staff and they represent, those words are chosen with intention. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Commissioner. These words, have been carefully selected, and as I testified to earlier, they represent our understanding of the situation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Vigneault.
Thank you.
So next one is Matt DeLuca for the Conservative Party.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have 2 areas of questioning in my 4 minutes, and I anticipate that with respect to the first, given recent comments, it may be subject to an objection. So what I propose to do is state my questions. If there is an objection, hear them, then have your ruling, and then if the witness is permitted to answer, then fine. If not, they will have been noted for the record. Is that okay?
Okay.
Director, a Globe and Mail article published earlier this week on April 10 reported that a member of the Liberal Party tipped off Hendong that CSIS was keeping tabs or watching him shortly after CSIS briefed the Liberals during the 2019 election. My questions are you aware of this reporting? Has CSIS taken any steps to investigate the allegation that a member of the Liberal Party tipped off Hendong that CSIS was watching him? Has the matter been referred to the RCMP for investigation? Do you believe that the allegation is true? And finally, can you tell us who in the Liberal Party, other than Azam Ismail, would have had security clearance to receive any information to the effect that CSIS was keeping tabs or watching Hendong in connection with the 43rd general election? As to relevance and propriety, Madam Commissioner, I appreciate this isn't one of the 3 documents or pieces of information that were dealt with in the application. I guess it was 2 days ago. That having been said, this is new information that has come to light only on April 10. It does relate to a matter that received great attention and prominence in this hearing, and I think the questions are proper to the extent that they can be answered.
Mr. Brooker.
Yes, well, my friend is unusually prescient. We do object to the question on a number of grounds, as he apparently acknowledges outside the scope of the director's re-attendance today. CSIS does not comment on investigations, whether there are or there aren't investigations. This is a media article, and my friend is asking the director to comment on a media article. There are no documents that I am aware of that have been provided to the commission and or produced to the public dealing on this matter. And it is nothing whatsoever to do with the terms of reference that you are here to make a determination on. So those are my submissions.
I maintain the objection. Clearly, these questions are outside the scope of what have been authorized for Mr. Vigneault's testimony this morning, as well as outside the scope of E and B contained in the terms of reference.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I have CAN 4079 R01 pulled up on the screen? Director, you'll recall that Ms. Chowdhury took you through these briefing notes.
Yes, I do.
And you differentiated these briefing notes from the first briefing notes in CAN 15482 that Ms. Chowdhury took you through. Isn't that correct?
I believe that I said that this briefing note was about a specific issue as opposed to more generic information on foreign interference.
Thank you. And for clarity, am I correct that your evidence here today is that with respect to the information that is contained in this briefing note, i.e. 4079 R01, both what we see and we cannot see because of the redactions, was this information that you did specifically communicate to the Prime Minister?
Madam Commissioner, I used the briefing material to help me form what I wanted to share with the Prime Minister. I can tell you that some of that information was absolutely used to brief on a very specific topic.
Okay, and did I understand your evidence correctly that you used the example of the PRC efforts in relation to Kenny Chiu to set the context for your comments to the Prime Minister? Is that correct?
Madam Commissioner, I do not believe I have said that. I had noted when Ms. Chowdhury brought me to that specific reference in the document that this would have been the kind of example, contextual example, to situate a specific issue of foreign interference. But I believe that I testified that I did not recall if I used those words and or that specific example in my briefing.
Okay. Under the heading current situation, there's a reference to the use of fundraising and material support. I have two final questions, and they're these. Prior to each of the 2019 and 2021 elections, did CSIS have any evidence of the PRC directly or indirectly channeling funds to specific federal candidates or their campaigns?
Madam Commissioner, I would refer back to the summary of the government's holding that have been provided to the Commission and to Council and Canadians to speak to that issue.
Okay, last question. At any point prior to the 2021 election, did CSIS brief either the Prime Minister, the PMO, the NSIA, Cabinet, or the PCO regarding any such evidence of specific channeling of funds for either election?
Madam Commissioner, I have testified at length about a number of these issues this morning, looking at the purpose of the three documents. I'm not sure about how the question refers to these documents.
Well, this document does refer under the heading current situation to what appears to be fundraising in connection with Kenny Chew's election. Well, I submit, Commissioner, that the director's answer is fulsome, and he has spoken what he can speak about this. Is that correct, Director? The question doesn't flow from the document in my submission.
But on top of it, I understand that you cannot in any event talk about more deeply about that. Am I right?
That would be correct, Madam Commissioner.
Okay, so thank you. So the question will be written down.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you. Next one is the Human Rights Coalition.
Good morning. Good morning, Director.
Good morning.
My first question is about notes you may have taken. You mentioned in direct examination this morning that in the process of briefing the PM, you read this material ahead of time and you take your own notes. You refine what you expect to be asked. You refine key messages. Do you recall if you took such notes in the lead up to the two briefings that relate to the three documents that we were talking about today?
Madam Commissioner, the way this process would have unfolded is whatever notes that I would have had at that point would have been produced to the Commission. I don't remember specifically if I have if such notes have been produced or not, but if I had those notes, they would indeed have been produced.
All right, thank you. So we as the parties, I don't believe we've received these notes. Maybe this is a question for Commission Counsel. Are we expected to receive these notes in the future, or is this something that will be? Is this something that has been dealt with in camera?
Madam Commissioner, maybe if I can just clarify. I did not say there were notes. I said if there were notes, they would have been produced. So I just don't want to leave the impression to Council or to the Commission that I believe there were such notes.
Okay, so Mrs. Tech, I think this is an issue that should be addressed if there's any need to address it outside this hearing.
Okay, thank you. If we can please pull up again 4079. And if we can go to page 2, where you speak about leveraging family. The PRC is known to target and or leverage family. Can you elaborate on this, Director?
So, Madam Commissioner, I believe in my previous testimony, I spoke about the fact that foreign interference is, yes, indeed affecting democratic processes, but also very importantly and somewhat dramatically engages and involves people, affects Canadians here in Canada. And one of the way that we know that has been documented publicly, but also has been documented through intelligence, is that family members here in Canada, but also back in the country of origin, are being leveraged. Leverage might be a question here of being pressured or being induced to, or provided, incitements to try to pressure their relatives back here in Canada, or pressured in a way to give threats and use coercive measures against them to increase the pressure on the Canadian individuals.
Thank you. To the extent you can answer this, is this something that the intelligence revealed happened in the lead up to the 2019 or 2021 general elections?
Again, Madam Commissioner, I think that's out of the scope of the inquiry, and in any event, the Commissioner, the government has, in its summary, said what can be said about the collective intelligence in this matter.
That's fine. I'm content to move on. And as a general point, is this leveraging a family? Is this something you brief the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office about, either in this briefing or other briefings?
Again, we're talking about specific 3 documents, and if the question, I guess, about this briefing makes sense, then or is appropriate, then the director could answer it in my submission.
Is it about this briefing? This document?
Yes, this is the line that says the PRC is known to target and or leverage families. So I'm wondering, the question is if the director briefed the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office about this point, and if not in this briefing and other briefings, this is a question that's been asked about other lines and other documents.
So, Madam Commissioner, maybe what I can say is that this specific briefing was about very specific topics, but I have, I believe, testified exactly on that point, where I talked about the way foreign interference is used against Canadians, and I also spoke about this quite at length publicly and in our annual reports, which is why one of the very pernicious impact of foreign interference is on Canadian diaspora communities, and why it's so important to work with them to increase their resilience and protect all Canadians.
All right, thank you. If we can go to the last bullet point in the background section, I believe that's up a page on page 1. Yes.
Will be your last line of questioning, Maitre Tech, because your time is already over.
I figured as much. That's all right. Thank you, Commissioner. This point about this will foster a bond of obligation to the PRC that will pay dividends for the promotion of CCP interests if elected. Same question. Is this a line that you briefed the Prime Minister or the Prime Minister's office about? And if not in this briefing, in another briefing?
Again, we can talk about this briefing or any of the briefings that the 3 documents refer to.
My question is the same.
Yeah, you understand it's about this briefing?
Yes, it is about this briefing.
Madam Commissioner, my testimony is that this was information that has been prepared for me. I spoke to a very specific aspect of this case that I cannot go into details because of the sensitivity, so this is the type of information either in that briefing, but for sure in our assessment, in our briefings, journal briefings, in our public briefings that we refer to when I testified in earlier. I spoke about the work of the United Front Work Department and the entire organizations that the PRC leverages, and this statement directly refers to these types of activities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So next one is Counsel for RCDA.
Bonjour, Madame la Commissaire. Bonjour, Monsieur.
Good morning, Madam Commissioner and Director Vigneault. I would like to, if you can bring up CAN 15842, please. And in this document, we talk about FI. And I'd like to know if you're talking about FI, generally speaking, is this also connected to Russia? Answer, Madam Commissioner. In this briefing note in question here, the material that you have here, yes, it does cover different aspects of foreign interference. Many of the elements are specific to the foreign interference of the Chinese government, but there are also other elements that are there with respect to the modus operandi of other countries. And yes, it does include Russia. Question. Maybe we could use the last point on page 3 as an example. Here you can see
is currently hampered by the lack of legislation, including criminal law and intelligence to evidence framework, and a true whole of government approach. Est-ce que ça s'applique à la Russie également, cette préoccupation?
Madam Commissioner, as I mentioned, some of the elements, as I was saying, have a common nature, and this can apply to other countries than China, and Russia would be amongst those countries. Question, well, does that explain why they talk about China and India, but not Russia in this document? Madam Commissioner, in my testimony, I believe I said that my testimony does say that the material available does cover generic material for foreign interference, but the specific briefing here for the Prime Minister was on very precise aspects. Question, so if your service had evidence and the Prime Minister were briefed, if there had been more evidence on Russia, it would have been included in this briefing note. Isn't that not true? Madam Commissioner. The fact, the reality is that when we do briefing sessions, we give a context, a framework, saturate the framework, so there's some limits to the information that we have, and we calibrate our intelligence.
The right context to the information, the level of certainty we have, so we try to convey that in our briefings. Donc, la deuxième partie de la question.
So the second part of the question, as I mentioned, this document here in question mentions a portion of the material that was being used to brief the Prime Minister that day. So there were the specific details that I discussed with the Prime Minister, unfortunately I can't say more about. Question. So on that point, I know that we're talking about intelligence to evidence, and here I would like to speak to an earlier stage when we're talking about a candidate, a politician, or during an election, during the writ period. In your testimony, you talk about how there is use of suspicious use of social media. So is this also another stage, maybe, which is a challenge to be able to come up with concrete evidence that can be used, that can be acted on?
I think we're getting away from the document and the three documents, Madam Commissioner.
Mr. Roy.
Oui, ma réponse.
Mr. Tiroir, well, my answer is that if CSIS think that there's a challenge to go from intelligence to evidence, my submission would be that there's a challenge that predates the moment that we do get intelligence, and you may have information from candidates or from electors that this could be. How does that connect to this stage here within the document? That's the question I'm answering. I think you should keep your question for the next phase of the Commission's work. I think this morning, given the authorized scope of the questioning, I think that we really have gone above and beyond what has been authorized. But keep your question. I think the question may be relevant and useful in the next phase of this Commission. This is all my questions. Thank you.
Next one is Council for Andon.
Good morning, Director. In one of the briefing notes we just looked at, it discussed unauthorized releases of classified information from the media. and the briefing note says that these leaks present a direct threat to the integrity of CSIS's operations. Can you tell us more about how media leaks present this threat?
Madam Commissioner, could Council call up the document, please, just to make sure that I know what exactly he's referring to?
Yes, for sure.
Sure, no problem. It's 4495. It's just the second bullet there.
So could Council please repeat this question?
Sure. So I just wanted to know if you could tell us more about how media leaks present this direct threat to the integrity of CSIS's operations.
So, Madam Commissioner, again, I testified to that in my previous appearance in front of the Commission. Having information that is released, very sensitive information that is released to people who may make use of it, interpret the information. Sometimes I would use my word over-interpret some of the information, draw different conclusions is an issue, absolutely. It also that any information that is released in this type of way presents a danger to our operations, affects the way we are able to continue to collect the intelligence that is critical to help protect Canadians, and therefore we take this extremely seriously. The last thing I would say is that as an intelligence service using both technical but also human sources, we are very, very concerned about the impact that unauthorized disclosure may have on the people who take risk to protect, to provide information to CSIS in order to protect Canadians. So we do take that extremely seriously.
Sure, and if we could scroll down to the next bullet. It says here that we are working closely with PCO and departmental security officials to identify the source of these leaks. Can you tell us about the activities that CSIS has undertaken to identify the leakers?
I think this is outside the scope of the three documents, although it is mentioned in the documents, but to discuss investigations in this forum, this can't be done.
Mr. Wang, do you have anything to answer?
I'm not sure if it's outside of the scope of the document because it says right there. I'm just wondering if the director can clarify this particular bullet.
And what about the second part of the...
If the director can't discuss national security information, I'm happy to accept that.
And is it the case, Mr. Vigneault?
Yes, Madam Commissioner, this would be this would be very detrimental. I cannot speak about ongoing investigations or operations.
So the question is written down.
But Director, can you confirm that CSIS is taking action to identify the leakers?
Again, I think the director's previous answer applies. Can't comment on investigations.
Sure. Director, will the public be informed if CSIS or any other agency identifies the leakers?
Same objection.
And my last question is, what has CSIS done to prevent media leaks going forward?
Seems we're on the same track again.
So it's written down.
Thanks. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. AG?
No questions, Commissioner.
Madam Commissioner, would you allow me to say one thing?
Yes, you can.
Yeah, I just would like to take the opportunity to just say that there's been a lot of comment made about the intelligence in the media, in the commission and so on. And I just would like to say that as a director of CSIS, I think it's important that we understand that intelligence is a little bit like a puzzle. Sometimes we have a very clear picture of the puzzle. Sometimes, through use of raw intelligence and assess intelligence, we are building that picture. But I think what is important to remember is that this is done by professional, trained intelligence analysts and professionals that are bringing this together. And I just would like to leave you, Madam Commissioner, and through you, the Canadians, with the message that intelligence is a very sophisticated approach. We are learning organization, so we are all trying to get better. But also, would like to say that I'm extremely proud of the work that the intelligence professional of CSIS do every day in Canada and around the world in very dangerous situations to protect the Canadians and make sure that we are safe, secure, and a prosperous country. Thank you very much, Madam Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Vigneault. Maid Chaudhry, do you want to conduct the re-examination?
I do have one question in re-examination.
Go ahead.
Director Vigneault, it's just a clarification question to help the Commission understand the documents that have been produced to it. So you mentioned, I believe, that for the October 26, 2022 briefing, there was a long heads up and the service had time to prepare, and the briefing notes that we see were approved at a very high level. Can you tell us whether that would hold true for all briefing notes, speaking points, talking points?
So, Madam Commissioner, again, depending on the nature, the amount of time, it would vary. If we have very, very little time to prepare for a briefing, our staff would then, take material that has already been prepared for other briefings, other purpose, and collate that together and provide that to me or to whomever else would be involved in providing the briefing. And so the material would be approved. If we cannot do an approval of that day, it will be material that has been reviewed before. So I would not have material that is provided to me that has not been somehow vetted. But again, it depends on the specific nature and circumstances of the briefing.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
That's all. So thank you, Mr. Vigneault. I know you're a very busy director, and I really appreciate that you made yourself available on a very short notice, actually. And I think your comments will be very useful to all those that are involved in the work we are conducting. So from now, you're free to go.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Merci, Madame la Commissaire. C'est gentil.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. That's very kind.
We all leave for the weekend. At least I hope you will leave for the weekend. I want to thank all the consuls. Honestly, when I started these hearings, I was not too sure what will happen because, as you know, we were working in a delicate and difficult environment.